Hi. On my Facebook wall, I posted a meme about Exodus 21:20 through 21, which reads, "If a man strikes his servant or his maid with a rod, and he dies under his hand, he shall surely be punished. Notwithstanding, if he gets up after a day or two, he shall not be punished, for he is his property." A Christian responded several times, declaring that the God of the Bible did not approve of slavery. He stated, "My God who allows slavery doesn't mean he thinks it's good." I believe this person meant something like, "Although my God allows slavery, that doesn't mean he thinks it's good." I think that because he was responding to my statement that just because humans enslave people, that doesn't mean they think it's good. I had a lot of thoughts on the statement of this man. So rather than trying to respond to him, I decided to write an article and do this video on the issue and share it with him. Permission, which this man says his God gave for slavery, or allowance equals approval. One of the definitions of the word approve is to consent or agree to. If you consent to something or agree to it, you've allowed it to happen. You've put your stamp of approval on it, whether you like it or not. And by the way, the word permit means to grant permission or allow liberty to do something. If God allows liberty to own another human being and states outright that the other human being is the property of his owner, that God has approved of this transaction. The first year I homeschooled my children, my older son was supposed to complete a task that would have taken the whole year to do. Somehow we overlooked it. When it came time to give an account to the school we were using, my son came up lacking. The school allowed or permitted him to read a particular book and do a book report on it, which he was able to accomplish pretty quickly. That's not what the school wanted. It's not what they considered best. It hadn't met their requirements, but they allowed it and thus approved it, and my son passed on to the next grade. Here's another example. If you go to a doctor and tell him you want surgery, and he says he thinks it's a bad idea, but you insist, he may approve, yes, approve, your surgery. He might think it's a bad idea, but he still approves if he allows it to happen. Allowance and permission imply approval. I get that Yahweh condemns behaviors yet doesn't strike people dead, every time they break one of his commandments. But Yahweh didn't even do what a doctor would do when you ask for surgery that he feels is unnecessary or not good. Yahweh made no commandment against slavery. He didn't even say, like the doctor would, that it's a bad idea. Instead, he endorsed it. He made it a part of his plan for humans. The man I was talking to also stated that Yahweh didn't approve of slavery, but simply regulated it by making laws about it. You don't make laws about acts if you disapprove of the acts themselves. You don't say, you may murder a man, but make sure you bury him. And you for sure don't come back later and say, I didn't want you to murder that man. Didn't you know that? When my children are growing up, I didn't say to them, if you kick the dog so hard that he can't get up and walk in a couple of days, I'll punish you. But if he does get up in a couple of days, then you won't be punished because he's your property. We wouldn't even say that regarding our pets, yet Yahweh said it about human beings, and then wants us to think he cares about us. If you walk into my house with a lit cigarette and I hand you an ashtray, I have regulated your smoking. I've also allowed you to smoke in my house. I have given you permission. I have approved and condoned your smoking in my house. I've let you know that it's not an offense to me. Now trust me, this is never going to happen. Apparently, I have a far greater abhorrence of cigarette smoke than this man's God has of human trafficking. The man thought he was making his God look better in my eyes, but he made him look more pathetic. He made his God look weak and scared to tell humans what he wants. He also made his God look more evil because he said his God allowed something he didn't approve of. His God just closed his eyes and ignored suffering while saying, go ahead, do it. I'm okay if you do. Don't worry about it. If you stand back and don't speak out to try to stop evil, you are complicit with that evil. Imagine you see a child being raped. And imagine you say, buddy, you shouldn't push too hard. That's a child. You might damage her. Just don't go in too deep, okay? And when you're done, clean her up and take her home. This is what this man is saying his God does. And the man approves. Oh, and remember what the Bible says about not warning people when they do evil? Their blood will be on your hands. So if indeed Yahweh disapproves of slavery and considers it bad, then all of the blood of all of the slaves who ever existed is on his hands. He could have spoken out and he didn't. But where there is no law, there's no transgression. Where there is no transgression, there is approval, for Yahweh is pleased. You stand uncondemned before him. That means Yahweh does not condemn the practice of slavery and hence approves of it. If permitting doesn't mean approval, then not permitting doesn't mean disapproval. So when Paul said, I don't permit a woman to teach, nor to exercise authority over man, but to be in quietness, he wasn't saying he disapproved of this or condemned it. If having permission doesn't mean something is good, then not having permission doesn't mean it's bad. Maybe Yahweh's okay with women preachers. Would my friend accept that? Of course he wouldn't. The church I grew up in, the Church of Christ, requires outright permission for everything they do. If something is permitted, they believe it is good and righteous and approved by Yahweh. Even if it's permitted only by example, then Yahweh approves. We have clear and precise words telling us that we may buy human beings. Yahweh even gave the Hebrews commands regarding how they might subjugate their own people for life, branding these slaves like cattle. Again, even if you're very conservative in your thinking, if Yahweh permits something, including slavery or divorce or whatever it might be that we're concerned about, then we have his approval. He is pleased with us. Was he not pleased with Abraham, who owned slaves? Abraham was the father of the faithful. And how about King David? He owned slaves, and he was a man after Yahweh's own heart. In fact, although it's a lie, the Bible says David lived his whole life not breaking any of Yahweh's rules except for the case of Uriah the Hittite. Not Bathsheba, mind you. David may have raped her. But the problem was that while he had many wives, he stole the only one Uriah had. And then he killed Uriah, of course. Anyway, David obeyed Yahweh while owning human beings. Yahweh didn't care about that. He didn't care, and he approved. Some demons asked Jesus to permit him to go into a herd of swine. When Jesus allowed this, he approved of it. Moses permitted divorce. That was the law of the land. To put a woman away, a man had to give her a bill of divorcement. It was permitted and approved of Yahweh. The Apostle Paul asked a chief captain for permission to speak, and he was given license or approval to speak. When Paul was a prisoner, he was given liberty, permission, and yes, approval to go visit his friends. He was also given permission or approval to be under house arrest rather than in prison. This Yahweh permitted it but doesn't condone or approve it is bull crap. But you know what? The question of whether he approves of slavery is not even moot. Or it is moot, depending on which definition of the word you use. We don't need and shouldn't seek Yahweh's approval of anything anyway. He has permitted something heinous, and he has lost his credibility and his holiness. He has approved of evil by allowing it to occur without punishment or even saying a word about it. Yes, slavery is evil. But does Yahweh know that? I should ask whether those who pretended to speak for this God know it, but we're pretending Yahweh exists. He may have known and not cared. After all, he knew he was wrong. He knew it was wrong to treat slaves harshly, and yet he approved of that. He didn't allow or approve of the Israelites being harsh with their own people in the way they could be harsh with their other slaves. Leviticus 25:46 says, it's speaking of slaves from other people groups, and it says, "You may make them an inheritance for your children after you, to hold for a possession. Of them may you take your slaves forever. But over your brothers, the children of Israel, you shall not rule one over another with harshness." Yahweh approved of this particular evil behavior when it came to other people. So I really don't know how my friend thinks it helps his God to try to deny that his God approves of slavery. Yahweh was fine with being harsh with people when he knew it was cruel. He just didn't care about the other people. By the way, Yahweh wouldn't allow his people to eat anything that died on its own. And that's wise, of course, because it's hard telling what caused the animal to die. It could have been a disease that might be transferred to humans when they ate the animal. But of course, Yahweh said the Jews could give the dead animal to foreigners so they could eat it or sell it to foreigners for money. The Jews were special. They were holy and had to be taken care of. Others not so much. Yahweh was the God of Israel, as he pointed out too many times to count. He didn't care about other people. Christians aren't special to Yahweh either, by the way. At least they aren't as special as the Jews were. Yahweh freed the Israelites when they were grossly mistreated by others. But Christians don't get off that easily. They must obey their masters, even if the masters are wicked. Just as wives must obey their master husbands who are wicked. Christians can't even run away from their masters. Yahweh stands on the side of slave owners, not runaway slaves. Think about that for a minute, and particularly how it applies to battered women. It's no wonder preachers sometimes tell them to stay with their husbands, even though their husbands are beating the living daylights out of them. My mom once had a social worker who told my mom that she always told women to stay with their husbands. But then one of her clients was murdered by her husband. The social worker said she no longer advised that. Thankfully, my mom left my dad when I was 14. There have been threats and emotional and physical abuse, so perhaps that social worker's advice saved us. Following the Bible can get you killed. The truth is, Yahweh approved of slavery by practicing it himself. He enslaved his own people when he took an ocean, once again putting his stamp of approval on the practice. He also used it and approved of it when he made Canaan a slave to his brothers because Canaan's father had upset Yahweh, and Yahweh likes to punish children for the sins of their fathers. Actually, the Israelites were always enslaved by Yahweh, seeing as how they were required to be obedient to him in all things, and he was their Lord and Master. Yahweh has some strange ideas, and he knows how to speak up when something irritates him or gets on his nerves. But his discernment about what ought to rile him and what shouldn't is horrible. Oh yes, he condones buying and selling human beings and bequeathing them to your children. He doesn't say one word against it and uses the practice himself. Yet he's generally a major snowflake and is triggered by the weirdest things. If you pick up sticks on Saturday, that's a major offense to him and he'll kill you. If you don't cover your poop, again, major offense. Because Yahweh may see it and maybe step in it when he's walking about and not turn away from you. Don't circumcise yourself? Well, he'll come after you to kill you unless your wife cuts off your foreskin herself to appease him. That's because it's all about him, of course. Saturday is his special day, or was his special day, to be honored. So you can't pick up sticks. Poop, obviously doesn't want to deal with poop. And circumcision is the sign that humans are slaves. But slavery of humans doesn't bother him. There's no skin off his back. My friend had other excuses for his God. He presented the idea that slavery is a good way to house and feed people. That's what he said. I find that pathetic. The slave Onesimus certainly thought he'd be happier if he ran away from his master. Philemon, his master Philemon. However, Paul forced Onesimus to return to his master. Forced. If allowance didn't mean approval, we'd still have to say that Yahweh allows the evil of slavery, but does not allow running away to gain freedom. Why would you want to worship a God like that? First, we know that Onesimus wanted to be free, and probably would have remained free if Paul hadn't forced him back into slavery. While it may be true that some slaves who are treated well, fear striking out on their own and prefer to remain with their master, that's not generally the case. And I'm betting that my friend would, as Matthew Henry did, declare, "Give me liberty or give me death." By the way, you know what all this means, right? The people who offered shelter and aid to slaves in this country, and the slaves who took advantage of the Underground Railroad, they were all sinning by going against the will of Yahweh. Slavery is allowed by Yahweh. Running away from slavery is not. We have a clear example of this. And this is in the New Testament, people. This is your Jesus now. It's not the wild and crazy Yahweh. Unless you're one of those Christians who think Paul was the Antichrist and you follow only Jesus, then you have to accept that Jesus put his stamp of approval on slavery. Philemon bought and paid for Onesimus. And Paul, through inspiration, right, sent Philemon's property, this man Onesimus, back to Philemon who owned him. Jesus is a slave owner too. If you're a Christian, he bought you. He paid for you. You became his slave at that point. And you have to do every little thing he says. He's your master and you're his slave. But you think he doesn't approve of slavery? Oh, and trust me, Jesus is a hard taskmaster. If you keep the whole law and yet offend in one point, you're guilty of the whole law. And the punishment for offending in that one point, well, we all know what fundamentalist Christians think that's going to be. Jesus is the slaver among slavers. When it comes to punishment for not obeying, other slave owners can't hold a candle for him to walk by. Jesus is the Most High slaver. But you think he doesn't approve of slavery? Second, and this is my second point about slavery's being good to help people eat and have a home. In the Bible, even if you were a Hebrew slave and were given a wife and had children after you were bought by your master, you couldn't gain your freedom without divorcing your wife and abandoning your children. If you wanted to keep them, you had to agree to be a slave for life, as I mentioned earlier. Yahweh puts ownership of human property above the sanctity of marriage and providing for your family. Let that sink in. A husband can run away from his wife and children. A slave can't run away from his master. Divorce and abandonment are okay if you just want to be free. According to my friend, the God of Israel apparently couldn't come up with a better way to take care of humans than enslaving them. He just said, "Shoo, I hate that y'all are hungry and have no homes. I wish I knew a way to help you make it better, but the best I can do is have you sold to others who will beat you. But hey, it's no better for the people with other gods. So, praise me. Yes, that's another excuse the man I talked to gave me. The nations about the Israelites enslaved people too. Of course, this man didn't realize that by making this argument about the providence of Yahweh, he denounced his claim that Yahweh didn't approve of slavery, but only permitted it to take place. By saying it was a good way to house and feed people, he was saying that this was Yahweh's way of providing, and hence Yahweh's will. If it was Yahweh's will, then Yahweh approved. Well, no surprise, I guess, that Yahweh couldn't do better. He also couldn't come up with a better way to save people than to have them commit murder and kill his son. Kill my son and I can somehow forgive you. I just can't figure out a better way. I'm a hot mess. I have to authorize evil so I can get good to come. And yes, again, even in New Testament times, Yahweh still hadn't figured out a better plan to provide for humans than slavery. Oh, he takes care of the lilies, which is supposed to make us feel like he takes care of us. Look at this, Matthew 6:28-33. Why are you anxious about clothing? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They don't toil, neither do they spin. Yet I tell you that even Solomon in all his glory was not dressed like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which today exists and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, won't he much more clothe you, you of little faith? Therefore don't be anxious, saying, what will we eat, or what will we drink, or with what will we be clothed? For the Gentiles seek after those things. For your heavenly Father knows that you need all these things. But seek first God's kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Really? And how, Yahweh? Well, according to my friend, he'll sell you off into slavery. And trust me, you'll toil and spin. This was the best and all-powerful God could do. Well, we humans aren't as helpless as Yahweh. We figured it out for him and ended slavery in various places. And most of us actually disapprove of slavery. Now, I know Christians don't, they can't. But the rest of us can and do. We're better than their God. Again, trying to make your God look good by saying he couldn't do better makes him look weak and pathetic and incapable of getting what he wants. It also has him condoning sin, condoning evil. Not that this is a surprise to the rest of us. After all, Yahweh commanded the murder of babies, which, by the way, makes me wonder why a Christian even feels the need to defend him against slavery. But I think Christians could come up with a better defense of their God if they think he is good all the time and worthy of worship. On second thought, Christians approve of murdering babies, yet wring their hands and shed tears over abortion. I keep forgetting that they can't seem to see their own hypocrisy. Finally, remember what this man said. Yahweh could permit something he didn't think was good. Well, I think the Bible calls that sin. If you know to do good and you don't do it, that's sin. Yahweh's own words struck him down once again. And seriously, do Christians really think that saying their God knows slavery is evil, yet he permitted it and practiced it anyway, makes their God look better? It makes him look horrible and weak and guilty of sin himself. Furthermore, if my friend is right, how would we ever know what Yahweh approved of and what he didn't? If he tells us to murder babies and buy and sell people and bequeath them to our children because they're our property, but he hates it and doesn't approve of it, well, how are we supposed to know what he really thinks, about or approves of anything? I never cease to be amazed at the lengths to which Christians will go to defend their evil God. They'll give away the farm just to prove that roast ears ain't corn. Now, my friend told me not to waste precious time writing this all up and doing a video about it because, and I quote, "There's nothing you can show me I haven't already seen, researched, evaluated, and concluded before. So his mind is closed on this subject. He's seen it all, heard it all, thought it all. But perhaps what I've said here will help somebody else. Thanks to my patrons, thanks to my subscribers, and thank you all for watching. Oh, and thanks to my commenters too. Bye.